I just want to stay in the moment. And I told you the last 2 weeks, and then this week and next week, I kind of just want to stay in the presence of God and not to um, get caught up in all the chaos. You know, you all going through a lot. There's a lot of things on your plate right now. And at church, I just want you to be able to receive. We've been talking about hope and peace. And this morning we're going to be talking about joy. These are very, very challenging. Ian, would you mind turning off that fan when you get a chance? These are challenging. If you really think about it, to have peace is challenging. Like we talked, how many of you struggle with stress and worry? Anyone? Is it like tenfold during this time of year? Is it worse? As the winter is upon us, we all know that it's more difficult with mental health. You know, you just dealt with a lot. And so when we talk about hope, we talk about peace, I want you to be taking that with you. And it's the symbolism of these candles that for each of you, as you leave here, are you seeing yourself as that candle? Sometimes it's like I look at the candle and I look at myself and I go, my flame is barely lit, you know? And what I need is for someone else that has a full candle, full flame, to come alongside me. And then maybe in that moment I can realize more peace or more joy or more hope. Because if we ever think that we're going through this alone, then that's a very, very sad place to be. It's a very lonely place, and it's very hard to see hope and joy and peace. The very things that God is trying to say is part of Advent, that we celebrate the coming of our King, and that because we have a future hope that he's coming again, this is what the Advent season is about. That you can wrestle with that. I'm going to share with you a couple of stories today that I think represent real life and the tensions that all of us face, and we have to wrestle with the scriptures in order to make these things real. It's one thing to kind of like come up here and talk about it, and then for you guys to listen and maybe have a intellectual exercise about it. But how many of us, don't raise your hand, how many of us truly have deep peace and hope and joy and love in our hearts? And the reflection of that is, it doesn't matter what's going on around us. Your life could be falling apart, and there's still that thing inside of you that says, regardless of that, I'm hopeful. Regardless of what I see around me, no matter what I go through, I can still have hope and joy. Because it's not found on the outside. It's found on what Jesus did for us. So what I'd like you to do is just take literally a minute. It could be with the person next to you, if you're at a table, with the people at your table. But just have a conversation and think about, what do you like most about this time of year, and what is the most challenging about this time of year? What's good about it is you'll find out you're not alone. All right? So just take a couple minutes and turn to the person next to you, or however that works, and just have a little conversation. Like, what do you like most about this time of year, and what's your biggest challenge this time of year? Any themes back there of what is some of the stuff that's challenging? Just yell it out. Stress. What is it? Family. Yeah. True. What else? What are the challenges? Just yell it out. Blended families. Good. Keep going. Christ being replaced by Santa. Interesting. Anyone else? Culture. What else personal? Expectations. Yes. I know it, right? It's so hard to live up to those expectations. I just say the heck with them. Right? What did you say? Shopping. Yes, a lot of stress in shopping and then traffic. Anyone else? Changing what?
The thought process of people where they're seeing it as give me rather than what can I do to be the hope to someone.
All right, rather than give, how can I be hope to someone? There's small children here. This could be a cuss, so just hold back. Earmuffs if you have children. The elf. Shh. The elf on the shelf. I thought you said something different when that came out. I was like, the blanket shelf or something. I heard something very different than that. Whew. And you're like preparing me. I just got a little hotter in here. Faye, what were you saying? The absence of family, yeah. Loneliness, right? Say that again. People missing. The empty chair. Yeah, so these are common themes. Go ahead. Phoniness. Yeah, that's not just this time of year. So yeah, that's one of our values here is being authentic and real. And so just kind of come as you are is one of our themes. What about the financial stress, right? So you can see that there's common themes for all of us. And so for those that are following after Christ and his kingdom, and we're trying to bring heaven to earth, how do we realize these things? And again, if you see yourself as this candle, like that you're the light, every day when you wake up is an opportunity. Just think about it, we're common. This is humanity. So what's happening here is happening in your community, in your society. So anyone that you're going into business with, you're meeting up for lunch, your friends, your neighbors, whatever you're doing, they are in that same place. So now what can you do to be a light without preaching at them? We don't need any more preachers out there. We need real people just going alongside people in life and being there for them, listening. And when there's an opportunity, when someone starts talking about the empty chair, maybe you can share a story. Maybe you can offer to pray for that person. I understand how it is. Right? There's little opportunities for you to spread the light. So let me jump in. We're going to be talking about joy. And I want to share it just quickly, but I want you to see the context of these stories because I want you to put yourself into the story. And the first one is from Genesis 17, and it's a story of Sarah and Abraham and Isaac. And this is a story of waiting. Many of us know this story, but in Genesis 17, God makes a covenant. And this is really, really important because he went to Abraham and said, I am going to make you the father of many nations. So this was a promise. This was proclaimed. This is what God said he was going to do. And Abraham received that. So he's just saying, okay, I get that, but I'm 99 years old. In order for us to have many nations, I'm an old man, and Sarah's an old woman. Do I have to say anything more about that? We're talking about 99-year-olds and 89-year-olds, all right? So all of a sudden, they're looking at each other and going, what is this God up to? This is bizarro world. And there's even like this moment where there's a chuckle. And so I want to read to you from Genesis 17 because this is about Abraham. So think about Abraham, this great man of faith, it says in Scripture. But let's see, when he first gets the promise, some of his doubts. So it says, God also said to Abraham, as for Sarah, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Abraham fell face down. You'd think he was going to worship or something, right? Something really spiritual here. What does he do? He laughs and says to himself, you've got to be kidding me, God. Like, this is ridiculous. This is what he's saying. This is impossible. Will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? This is insane. Now just stop there for a second. Have you ever felt that God had whispered something to you? You ever have an answered prayer that built up your faith, but then there was a waiting period. The waiting is the worst. Isn't the waiting? I was thinking about, like, what are the things that we would wait for? And I was thinking, when your teenager is out and about, and it's midnight, and then it's 1 in the morning, and then it's 2 in the morning, and now you're going to kill him. Right? But that waiting, right? Those 2 hours, those 3 hours of waiting is like, are they okay? Like, you first go from concern to anger to, oh, they better not come home, right? And you go through this process, but that waiting is when your faith is tested. What do you really believe in the waiting? And I was thinking about the tests, waiting for test results, and how long those days are, not knowing. And it says in Scripture, all these wonderful promises, all these great faith statements about the God that we serve, and yet many of us know that when the tests come back, it's not what we wanted to hear. We don't get what we want. And in the waiting, you question. And you have to wrestle with a God that says, the scripture that says, God is love. And then we go to Sarah. And I'm calling this Sarah's sarcasm. Then one of them said, this is in Genesis 18, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? I've waited all my life. This is a cruel joke. You're going to wait till I'm 89 years old, God? Now think about this. Sarah was this amazingly gorgeous young lady. Scriptures say that. Can't have kids. She's waited all her life. And all of a sudden, God, you have the audacity to make this promise. It's laughable. If you and I are real before God, our prayers should kind of reflect this. Because that's life. Life is about ups and downs. If life always goes as expected, we don't really need faith. So I want you to kind of think about in your own life as you go through those waiting times, as you go through these things of saying, God, I can't even get my mind around this. Where do you land? What happens inside of you? Why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? Maybe this is what God is trying to demonstrate, both to them and to us. When you say, my situation is impossible, maybe this scripture is trying to do something inside of you if you think that. Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I didn't laugh. But he said, yes, you did. This is about two people struggling to trust God. One of the things I love about the scriptures is it's real for all of us, because how many of us struggle to trust God? When life isn't going as planned, that's the hardest time, and it tests our faith. But this is also a story about God and his faithfulness. And here's what happens. Genesis 21. It says, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said. Can you imagine when new life is inside of you when you thought it was impossible? Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age. Oftentimes in scriptures, the miracles are held. This time it's held within. A lot of times the miracle's held with a loaf of bread. It's in the hands, or a jar of oil. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter. Wait, did I miss something? Okay. And everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet here I am. I have borne him a son in his old age. So this story kind of turns out great, right? Here's the thing about joy. All of us, I would suggest, have had good moments in God where his faithfulness was realized in your life, right? You kind of have to look back sometimes and say, when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't look that way. But when I look back a few years out, I say, geez, this is what I think God was doing in my life. And I can see his favor and I can see his faithfulness. That does not necessarily automatically give us joy the next time it happens. So I'm asking myself, what did happen to Sarah? Was she able to internalize the gift of joy through this experience with God? And I'm posing that to all of us today. Because I want us to get a little bit closer to this ideal that joy is a gift from God and we can take it into our being. But it's up to us to take these experiences and internalize them in the deepest way possible, so that the next time when life happens, and it will, you can be reminded of God's goodness and his faithfulness. So my reflection question to you is, how do you make joy a deep, lasting part of your being? How do you do it? Be thinking about that, because it's a practice. It's something that we have to figure out. And one clue is our joy is not found in our circumstances or the outcomes. It's found in God's faithfulness, in our ability to trust the next time. So joy and trust go together. So that's the first story. The second story is of Paul and Silas. Bill, what time is it? I can't see that 9 o'clock. 11? Good. So this is a story of Paul and Silas from Acts 16. It says, when they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not allow them to. All right, listen to that. So the Spirit of the Lord did not allow them to go into these towns. So they passed by Mysia and went down to Troas. During the night, Paul had a vision of a man of Macedonia standing and begging him, come over to Macedonia and help us. After Paul had seen the vision, we got ready at once to leave for Macedonia, concluding that God, beautiful. That was like to emphasize my point. That God called us to preach the gospel to them. Think about how strange this is, right? Isn't this just weird? Like, they're on their way. These are two men called by God to bring his good news into different towns, and all of a sudden the Spirit says, don't go there. And they stop, and he says, I have this dream, this vision, and I believe it's from God, so we're going to pack up and we're going to Macedonia. So they believe they've heard from God. And I'm setting you all up. When you think you've heard from God, then what? If you've heard from God, everything should just be great. Right, David? You ever heard from God and it not be great? It must not have been God. Well, let's look at this. So it gets better, because on their journey, all of a sudden they meet this woman named Lydia, and they have this amazing experience. They meet Lydia, they get to know her, and all of a sudden they bring her to her household, and they all get baptized. So you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, this is so easy, right? God has just empowered us. He's laid out the groundwork. He told us not to go there, to come here. And look at the first thing we do, the first person we touch, their whole household comes to know God, and they get baptized. Man, we must have heard from God. Isn't this amazing? But then the next scene happens. And they meet this female fortune teller. And in this fortune teller, her owners are making a killing. I mean, they're making tons and tons of money off of her ability to tell the fortunes. And for whatever reason, she just starts harassing them. She's following them and yelling at them. And Paul is getting like sick and tired of it. So at one point, he goes up to her and he says it casts a spirit out of her, which now doesn't allow her to be able to tell anyone's fortunes anymore. So he's like, good, this was good. All right, we're all set. Well, the owners didn't like it very much. And the owners are now ripped because now their revenue stream is taken away from them. So they want Paul and Silas put away. So they have them imprisoned. Not only were they put in prison, they were arrested. And then before they were put in prison, they were beaten. They were stripped naked. And it says that they receive a flogging with the rods. So I want you to think about when it says that Jesus was flogged with the 40 lashes. I don't know which is worse, lashes or the rod, but it sounds like it's pretty horrific. So they got beaten and they're stripped naked. So just pause right there. God, what are you doing? In the midst of this, we're following your lead. We're doing everything you're saying to do, and it was all going great and according to the plan until we meet this lady. And here we are, risking it all to follow you, and we find ourselves in prison, chained, naked, and beaten. What do you do? What do we do when life doesn't go as planned? This is the second scenario I want you to think about. Because these are situations when we have to wait. Our joy can be stolen from us. When things don't go according to plan, and actually they get worse. Your life is falling apart. Like, we go right to the next verse. I hope it's not on the screen. Don't put it on the screen if it's not on the screen. But what we do is we go to the next verse, and everything's just fine. And it's not fine. My life's not fine. Your life's not fine. We're in this in-between time, and what you do there matters. This is where joy is actually realized, is when you allow the seeds to get inside of you so deeply that you can be stripped naked and beaten and imprisoned and figure out a way to still have joy. But I don't think this just happens overnight. But I am impressed by what these two men are able to do. Because I put myself in their shoes, and I don't think I could get there. And I want you to be honest with yourselves this morning, because what I do want is for all of us to get a little bit closer. Wherever you're at, in the ability to receive joy in the midst of the worst things that come our way. Because I know some of your stories and some of the pain that you're in. And I want you to be able to have joy even in the midst of it. Even if I can give you this much. And maybe the next time you can get a little bit more. But let's look at what they do. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. All I want to say about this is there's something about the ability to kind of look at your circumstances and take your eyes off of the physical pain, the physical hurt, the physical I'm in jail, and somehow get my eyes above that through prayer and through singing songs to God. And that maybe in that obedience, in that step of action, maybe even in the midst of your circumstances, God can still do something amazing. Perhaps. And I love that because it's not just God coming and doing the miracle, it's something that he's waiting to see. Can you turn it over to me? Can you just muster up the strength of a mustard seed to believe that even in the midst of what you're looking at and feeling right now, it will not stay that way? There is hope, there is light, and it's coming. And all of a sudden, in the next scene, there's this violent earthquake, and the jailer is beside himself because in those days, if you didn't obey what they said, you were going to be put to death. And all of a sudden, this violent earthquake happens, and all the gates are shaken, and the chains come off, and all the prisoners are now set free in the sense of they can walk out if they want to, but they don't. And all of a sudden, the jailer goes, oh my gosh, everyone's going to leave, and I'm going to be executed. And Paul yells, and he goes to kill himself. The jailer goes to kill himself because he doesn't want to face what's on the other end of this. And all of a sudden, Paul says, don't do it, don't do it. We're all here. We're all here. And the man is moved by the songs and the prayer, and them just staying there and being concerned about him. So much so that in Paul and Silas's misery and in their pain and their suffering, this jailer comes to God. Not only him, but his whole family. And I sit there and I marvel at that. But I'm challenged by it. So I want you to weigh the tension of that. Because I think sometimes we go by it too quickly. Because it's probably the hardest thing to do is to pray and worship when everything that you wanted to happen doesn't happen. And not only that, you're actually in pain and suffering. So before Doug and Danielle come up to light the joy candle and share their story, I want to leave you with some rhetorical reflection questions. Why did God have them come to Macedonia in the first place? Think about that. There's so many answers and life lessons built into that one question. Do you all realize that Scripture is meant to be like torn apart, wrestled with, questioned, doubted, discussed, turned over? Like, the Scriptures can hold up to our critiques. You know what I'm saying? You can go into it. But ask yourself this question. Why did God have them go to Macedonia in the first place? And was it worth it, Paul and Silas? Lydia, fortune teller, owners? Did it all go as planned? Did Paul and Silas have to overcome their own suffering and questions in order to pray and worship? What had to happen for them to get to that place? Here's a really tough question. What would have happened if they had not gotten to this place of prayer and worship? Was the miracle dependent on it or not? Would God have done this miracle? Would the jailer and his family come to know Christ and be part of building his kingdom? This, to me, makes I get all like, oof, those are good questions. Did you want to say something? Hold on.
As you were talking, I was just thinking a simple thought that they were together. Paul wasn't alone. Silas wasn't alone. And somehow I think when you're suffering, when you're not alone, joy is a little more accessible.
Nice. Why don't you guys come up, and if anyone else has something to share? This is what I like. I like it when just people have thoughtful, like these questions should do something inside of us. Each week we've had different folks come up and share their story. I'm just going to give this to you as I keep talking for a second. Wrestle with these questions. Wrestle, nice. I want to sit with you.
Nice.
We're together. Yeah, Steve, see how this is all working so beautifully? Never goes this way. But think about your life's questions. When have you asked God, why? Why are you letting this happen to me, God? I thought you asked me to do. I thought you said this in Scripture. I thought you promised that. Why, God? Why? And then he turns it over to this couple, and they start sharing.
All right. I guess I'm here to tell a story. Sean's a pretty smart guy because he asked Danielle to do this, because I definitely would have come up with a very good reason why I'm not supposed to be up here. All right, a story about joy. Well, Jack back there is 9 weeks old, and that, that's our joy for the year right there, I suppose. But it's, I guess it was joy and love, and it was, the eve of Thanksgiving last year when I finally you know, became a big enough man to ask Dee to marry me. And, you know, and family was definitely on my radar there. So, and it's been a little bit of a road. It's been fun. I guess I learned more about love, I suppose. I don't know, you asked her to marry me. I felt like I was like 16. You couldn't teach me anything, right? You know, I'm riding through the holidays. I just got engaged. You know, I've got nothing to learn about love. I'm riding high. And then, you know, we're starting a family here, and we go through one miscarriage, and I guess you learn in, you know, that hope and disappointment at the same time. You learn a little bit more about love. And when you had nothing to learn, you're learning more, and you think you see her for 9 months, carry, you know, my firstborn child, and you say, damn, you know, there's a little bit more to love. And I don't know, he was born. We didn't know the sex of the baby, so it was kind of like this cool moment in the delivery room there, where, you know, it finally all comes to, and he pops out, and the umbilical cord. She did a lot of work. I was just along for the ride, right? So I'm just, you know, telling her to keep her eyes closed. It's a bloodbath down here. And, you know, there's Jack, and I'm sorry, I didn't really prepare anything for this. Umbilical cord comes out kind of wrapped underneath his arm, around his head, and I'm throwing my hands on my head, and I've been up for 14 hours, and I took one nap. It was one nap. It was like an hour. And I'm in like shock, and the nurse does this like Indiana Jones recovery thing, and, you know, I'm a little bit de-stressed, and he's not tangled, he's breathing. I'm like, this is cool. And she holds the baby up, and she says, what is it? And I'm like stuttering in shock and awe, everything. I just say baby. You know? And like, we're a good like 30 seconds, minute into this child's life, and I still haven't told Danielle if we had a boy or a girl yet. And the nurse says to me like twice more, what is it? And I go down, I'm like, oh my, and I just start crying, right? I mean, I just had my firstborn son. And you learn a little bit more about receiving, right? And then joy and love, and you watch her be a rock star with this kid, and what it takes to, I mean, it's breastfeeding's all this, it's a lot of job. And, you know, so from 13 months ago till today, Evan couldn't teach me anything about love, but this one and Jack, it's been a fun journey, long road, and I love you.
I love you too. Can I share? Hold on. I guess I just had another thought. You know, Sean had asked us, and I was trying to think about how not to be trite, because everyone always talks about how, you know, a child brings you joy and all of that. And just now actually popped into my head about, like, what have your experiences been about life that brings you to this point? I had lost my mom when I was very young, and for a long time, I thought that meant that I wouldn't know how to be a mother. And I think if I would have let my thinking take over, maybe I wouldn't have this, you know? And so there's another plan, because here it is, this wonderful child back there, and The other thing is just about like love, how our experience has been just like pure love from even strangers, which is a reminder, you know, like we forget. We walk around with our heads down or in our phones or whatever, and we forget, and they remind us about like love. I mean, everyone's just been asking us to hold the baby, strangers. I mean, went to the eye doctor, and this woman was just like, "Can I hold your baby?" And I was like, "Sure." And when I went back, she was like, "My daughter said you can't just hold strangers' babies." And I was like, well, you know, it's just love, right? And we need to be reminded of that. And that's been a great reminder, is that, yes, of course, babies bring joy, but it's just been a wonderful experience. And of course, starting a family has been love. And Doug has been awesome and wonderful. And again, yeah, you're just learning more love, like just to see someone. And to see even everyone, I mean, look back, Jack's back there, look at him. He's just like love. There's someone loving him right now. Like, it's just awesome. So thank you for this community and loving us. And we love you guys too. So thank you.
Thank you.